The rain was cold that night, the kind that cuts through old bones and makes you feel every year you've lived. I'd settled into my small cabin by the lake, the place where Eli and I used to fish when he was just a kid with a dream bigger than his body could hold. Now it was just me and the ghosts. When I heard the knock on my door, I wasn't expecting it. My life had gone quiet over the past few weeks, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. I opened the door slowly, and there she was. Marissa, drenched, trembling, mascara bleeding down her face like war paint after a battle lost. She looked nothing like the woman who'd stood in my house just months ago wearing diamonds and disdain. This woman was broken. This woman was desperate. "Silas," she started, her voice cracking like old leather. "Please. I have nowhere else to go." Have you ever had someone in your life who betrayed you so completely that you thought you'd never recover? Someone you trusted, and they turned that trust into a weapon. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the story. I didn't say anything at first. I just stepped aside. Old habits die hard, and despite everything, despite the fortune she'd stolen, despite the legacy she'd tried to bury, despite the way she'd disrespected my son's memory, I couldn't turn away someone standing in the rain like that. Maybe that made me weak. Maybe that made me human. I still don't know which one it was. She walked in slowly, like she was afraid the floor might collapse beneath her. Her designer coat, or what was left of it, clung to her like a second skin soaked in defeat. She sat down in front of the fireplace without asking, and I watched her stare at the flames like they might tell her what to do next. "They took everything," she whispered. Her hands were shaking so badly I thought she might drop them. "The accounts, the house, the cars, even my jewelry. They said something about a backup clause. Some protection Eli put in place that I didn't know about." I poured myself a cup of tea. My hands were steady. I needed them to be. I sat across from her and let the silence sit between us like a third person in the room. "They took it all because it was never yours to begin with," I said quietly. "And that's exactly what Eli wanted to happen." Her eyes snapped up to meet mine. For the first time that night, she looked like she was actually seeing me. Understanding was starting to crack through her desperation. "You knew?" she asked. Her voice was small now. Small and lost. "Eli knew," I corrected her. "He knew you'd try something. He made sure his legacy couldn't be buried in your greed." She covered her face with her hands and sobbed, real tears this time, not the fake ones I'd seen at his funeral. But the question that hung in the air was this. If Eli had set all this up, if he'd known she was going to betray him, what else did he know? And what had he done about it? Let me take you back to a time when things still made sense. Before the lies. Before the betrayal. Before I knew my son's wife was capable of stealing not just his money, but his legacy. I wasn't always a wealthy man. That's important for you to understand. When I was young, I had nothing but a beat-up truck and a dream that wouldn't die. The kind of dream that keeps you up at night and wakes you up at 4 in the morning, reminding you that you've got work to do. I started small, moving cargo from warehouse to warehouse, building relationships brick by brick, dollar by dollar. My wife, Helena, stood beside me through all of it. She was the kind of woman who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. When the money came, she didn't change. She stayed the same kind of woman who'd make me coffee at dawn and tell me everything was going to be okay, even when we were eating beans and rice for the third night in a row. We built Drayton Logistics together, and then we built a life around it. Eli came into our world like a blessing we hadn't even asked for. That boy was everything I hoped for and nothing I expected. He was brilliant. The kind of smart that doesn't need to prove itself because it just naturally rises to the top. But more than that, he was good. Genuinely good. The kind of person who made you believe there was still light in the world. Watching him grow was like watching a masterpiece unfold. He took the company I'd built from nothing and transformed it into something global. He opened doors I never imagined existed. He earned respect from people who don't respect easy things. Investors wanted to work with him. Partners trusted him. Rivals admired him. Then cancer took Helena from me. I'll never forget the day she looked at me from that hospital bed and grabbed my hand. The doctors had already told us there was nothing else they could do. It was just a matter of time. She was so small by then. Cancer had taken everything from her except her eyes. Those eyes were still bright, still full of fight. "Take care of Eli," she whispered. "He'll need your wisdom more than your money." I squeezed her hand. "He has both," I told her. She shook her head slightly. "No, he won't. The money will make things complicated. Promise me you'll watch over him." "I promise," I said. She died 3 days later. 6 winters ago, and I still remember the weight of that promise like it was written in stone. For 2 years after Helena was gone, it was just me and my boy. We worked together. We traveled together. We sat on that lake in the cabin and didn't say much of anything, which is sometimes the most important conversation you can have with someone. Eli was carrying his own grief, and I was carrying mine, and we carried them together. And then one Sunday, he called me and said he wanted me to meet someone. The first time I met Marissa, I understood why Eli had fallen. She walked into my study like she owned the room, and half the men in the world would have felt the same pull. She had the kind of beauty that stops conversations. Polished. Perfect. Like she'd been designed in a lab specifically to turn heads and break hearts. "Mr. Drayton," she said, extending her hand. "Eli's told me so much about you." Her grip was firm. Calculated. I noticed right away that she didn't smile with her eyes. Most people don't know the difference, but I do. Her mouth smiled. Her face performed the role of a woman who was delighted to meet her boyfriend's father. But those eyes were measuring me, cataloging me, deciding what I was worth. We had dinner that night, nothing fancy, just the 3 of us at my house. She wore white to a casual meal in my home. Helena would have called that a flag waved too soon, and my wife usually knew what she was talking about. Eli was different when Marissa was around. Brighter, more animated. But it was like watching someone perform a version of themselves rather than just be themselves. He kept glancing at her, as if checking to make sure she still approved of him. She sat with perfect posture, ate with careful bites, and laughed at all the right moments. "Your son has such vision," she told me, reaching over to touch Eli's arm. "The way he thinks about expanding the business internationally, it's remarkable. Most men his age are still figuring out how to tie their shoes. Eli is out there reshaping entire industries." "He's always been like that," I said, watching her. "Yes," she agreed, but the way she said it made it sound like she'd discovered this fact about him. Like she was the expert now. "That's what I love most about him." She didn't say, "one of the things." She said, "most." And it was such a small word choice that I almost didn't catch it. But I did. After dinner, they left together. I sat in my study with a drink and that old familiar feeling. The same warning I used to get when a business deal wasn't what it seemed. The same instinct that had kept me alive for 70 years. 2 weeks later, Eli called me. "Dad, I'm making some changes to my will," he said. His voice was careful. "I wanted you to hear it from me first." I didn't push him. I'd learned long ago that if you push your kids too hard, they just dig in deeper. "I'm setting up a trust," he continued. "Marissa and I will co-manage it. It protects the company, protects everyone involved. Don't worry, You're protected too. Eli, what's this really about? I asked. There was a pause. A long one. It's about making sure that if anything ever goes wrong, if anything unexpected happens, the company survives, he said quietly. And the people I care about survive with it. I didn't know it then, but my son was already preparing for his own death. The call came on a Tuesday. I was in my office going through spreadsheets when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Sometimes life works that way. You answer a call from a stranger and everything changes. Mr. Drayton? This is Captain Alessandro with the Portuguese Coast Guard. I'm calling regarding your son, Eli Drayton. He was aboard a private aircraft that departed Lisbon this morning headed toward. I stopped listening after that. The words became sounds. Sounds became noise. My hands went numb, and for a moment, I couldn't remember how to breathe. His body hasn't been recovered, the captain was saying. The plane went down in open water. We're still conducting search operations, but given the circumstances, we're preparing the families for. I hung up. I don't remember doing it. I just remember my hand moving and the sound stopping. The funeral happened in a blur. There were flowers everywhere, roses and lilies and arrangements that probably cost more than I made in a week when I was starting out. There were cameras. So many cameras. The press loved a story like this. Billionaire's son dies in mysterious plane crash. Widow left to run empire alone. Marissa wore black. She looked like a painting someone had titled, Grief. She stood beside me at the graveside, and when the flag was folded, she reached out and grabbed my arm. I felt nothing from her grip. No warmth. No shared pain. Just the weight of her hand. When we were leaving the cemetery, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. Perfect tears. Perfectly placed. He'll always guide me, she whispered, more for the cameras than for me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she'd loved my son enough to let his loss actually matter to her. But my wife's voice echoed in my head. Watch over him. I had failed her. Eli was gone, and I had failed. By that evening, Marissa's lawyers were already in motion. They called my attorney and informed him that I was being removed from the board. For the sake of clarity, they said. Nothing personal. Just legal protocol. By the next morning, I wasn't a board member anymore. By the fourth day, I received notice that I needed to vacate the family estate. The estate that Helena and I had built. The walls that held 60 years of my life with her. The rooms where I'd watched my son grow from a baby into a man. For legal clarity, her lawyer wrote in the letter. I packed my belongings quietly. I took Eli's old watch from my nightstand, the one I'd given him for his 21st birthday. I didn't say anything to Marissa. I just left. And in leaving, I realized I'd lost everything. Or so I thought. 2 days after I moved out of my own house, something happened that changed everything I thought I knew about my son. I remember the warehouse like it was yesterday. It was one of the oldest buildings in our facility, the place where Drayton Logistics had actually started, before we moved to the fancy offices downtown. It was the one warehouse Eli never let Marissa touch. He'd been very clear about that. That building stays off limits, he'd told her. It's a backup facility. Nothing important. Marissa believed him because she was too busy counting the money in the other facilities to ask questions. I drove there without thinking too hard about why I was going. Grief makes you do strange things. It makes you want to be close to the places where the people you loved spent their time. It makes you want to touch the things they touched, stand where they stood, try to find them in the empty spaces they left behind. Inside the warehouse, everything was quiet. The loading bay doors were closed. The office area was dark. I walked through the familiar hallway, my footsteps echoing off concrete, and I went into Eli's private office. It was exactly as he'd left it. His desk. His chair. The picture of us fishing from the cabin. I sat down in that chair, and I let myself cry for the first time since the funeral. Real tears. Not the kind you cry for cameras, but the kind that come from somewhere deep inside, from a place that's been cracked open. After a while, I got up. And that's when I noticed it, a locked cabinet in the corner of the office. The kind you'd overlook if you weren't looking for it. I'd been in this office 100 times and never really registered it before. It had Eli's name on it. I found the key in his desk drawer, sitting exactly where someone would put it if they wanted someone to find it eventually. When I opened the cabinet, I found an envelope. Just an envelope. My name written on it in my son's handwriting, my old man. Inside were 3 things. A secondary will, a notarized power of attorney, and a USB drive. I read the will first. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. It was dated 2 years before his death. 2 years. It stated that if unauthorized misuse of company assets occurred, the trust Marissa controlled would become null and void, and the company would pass to me. Dad, I whispered, reading the words. You clever boy. The power of attorney gave me access to what the document called emergency redirection funds. Offshore accounts. Liquid assets. The kind of money that doesn't leave a trace because Eli had made sure it wouldn't. But the USB drive was the real revelation. I took it home and plugged it into my computer that night in the cabin. What I found made me understand my son in a way I never had before. He'd known. Somehow, someway, Eli had known that Marissa was going to try something. He'd documented everything. Recordings, emails, financial projections. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. She'd married him for his money, and she had a plan to take it all. And Eli had set a trap. The files showed that when Marissa triggered her first fraudulent transaction, which the system was designed to flag automatically, it would trigger a security protocol. That protocol would redirect $65 million into accounts only I could access. $65 million. My son had left me a way to stop her. But more than that, he'd left me a way to save something much bigger than money. The question was, would I use it? I sat with that USB drive for 3 days before I opened it. 3 days of staring at it like it might explode. 3 days of knowing my son had left me something that could either save everything or destroy what was left of my sanity. On the 4th day, I plugged it in. The files were organized. Eli had always been organized. There were folders labeled by date, by transaction type, by name. Marissa's name appeared over and over again. Communications with lawyers I'd never heard of. Shell companies registered in places I couldn't pronounce. Bank accounts in Dubai. Investment schemes that looked legitimate on the surface but were built on borrowed money and false documents. One file was titled simply, "When You Need This." I opened it and found a video. My son's face filled the screen. He was sitting in his office, this office, and he looked tired. Tired in a way that money can't fix. "Hey, Dad," he said. "If you're watching this, it means something happened to me. Or it means Marissa tried something stupid. Probably both." I had to pause it. Had to take a breath. Hearing his voice after the funeral, after the silence, after the loss, it cracked something open in my chest. When I could see again, I pressed play. "I know you well enough to know you're probably feeling guilty right now. Like you should have seen this coming. Like you should have protected me. But here's the thing about protection, Dad. Sometimes the person who needs protecting doesn't know they need it yet. I was blind. I loved her, and I didn't want to see what she was doing." He leaned closer to the camera. 2 years ago, I figured it out. I found evidence of her meetings with people who specialize in financial fraud. I found messages between her and her lawyer about loopholes in the will I'd written. I found bank statements showing her moving money around, testing the system, planning her exit strategy. She was going to take everything and disappear. He paused, looked directly at me through the screen like he was still alive. But here's where I got smart. I created a parallel system. A backup. When she makes her move, and she will make her move, the security protocols will catch it. They'll lock down everything. And that money will go somewhere she can never touch it. Somewhere it belongs. The video ended. I rewound it and watched it 3 more times that night. My son had anticipated his own death. My son had built a fortress around his fortune because he'd known his wife was a thief. The question that kept me awake was simple. What had he meant about the money going somewhere it belongs? I dug deeper into the files. And that's when I found the second layer. The part Eli had really wanted me to discover. While I was grieving in that cabin, Marissa was building her empire of lies in the real world. She started hosting parties. Galas, really, the kind where champagne costs more than my truck used to. She'd appear in magazines with headlines like The Iron Widow and Billionaire Beauty Takes Control. She sold company assets left and right. She repositioned the entire Drayton logistics structure to funnel money into her personal accounts. And with every transaction, she was triggering Eli's security protocols without even knowing it. But she was smart. Too smart to be obvious about it. She partnered with a tech investor named Marcus, a guy she was dating by the 3rd month of widowhood. Together, they developed what looked like a legitimate luxury development project in Dubai. 5-star hotels. High-end condos. The kind of development that attracts real money. Except it was all financed on borrowed funds and falsified documentation. It was a house of cards built on quicksand. I watched from a distance as the empire crumbled. Not because I did anything. Because Eli had already done it. By the end of the first week, investors started getting nervous. The paperwork didn't add up. The financial projections seemed faked. By the 2nd week, the first lawsuit was filed. By the 3rd week, her accounts were frozen. Federal investigators got involved. Her lawyers scattered like rats. She lost the estate. She lost the company. She lost Marcus, who disappeared the moment the money dried up. She lost the jewelry, the cars, the clothes. She lost everything that had made her feel powerful and untouchable. And she had nowhere to go. I read about it in the news like I was reading about a stranger's life. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt like justice had been served. But mostly, I just felt empty. Because no amount of Marissa's suffering was going to bring my son back. No empire crumbling was going to fill the hole he'd left in my chest. The press called it the fastest fall from grace they'd ever seen. Marissa Drayton's dynasty collapses in 3 weeks, the headlines screamed. They didn't know why. They didn't know about Eli's trap. They didn't know about the security protocols or the backup systems or the offshore accounts. They just saw a woman who'd lost everything. And then, one cold night in late October, she showed up at my door soaking wet, begging for help. I didn't know it then, but watching her stand there in the rain was going to force me to make a choice I wasn't sure I was ready to make. I let her inside because I'm a weak old man. That's the honest answer. Not because I forgave her. Not because I wanted to help her. But because the alternative, turning someone away in the rain, felt like something Helena would have given me hell for. She sat in front of the fire, shaking. Her designer coat clung to her like a second skin. Her hair, which used to be perfectly styled, hung in wet tangles around her face. She looked small, defeated. Like the woman who'd stood in my house months ago wearing diamonds and arrogance had been replaced by someone else entirely. They said I committed fraud, she whispered. They said the documents I used were forged. They said my signatures on the company transfers were invalid. They froze my accounts. They took the house. They took everything. I poured her tea. I'm not sure why. Maybe because that's what you do when someone sits in your home, broken. Maybe because moving my hands kept me from thinking too hard about what I was doing. There was a clause in Eli's original trust, I said quietly. A backup. A protection. Her head snapped up. You knew? She asked. Eli knew, I corrected. He knew what you were going to try. He made sure you couldn't succeed. She covered her face and sobbed. Real sobs this time. The kind that come from a place deep inside where all the pretense has been burned away. I watched her cry, and I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt sad. After a while, she looked at me with desperate eyes. Please, she said. I have nothing. No money. No friends. No family who'll speak to me. Just help me start over. You have access to the funds, don't you? Just something small. Enough to get on my feet. I sat there in the silence, and I realized something. She still didn't understand. She still thought this was about money. She still believed that with enough cash, she could escape the consequences of what she'd done. She didn't understand that Eli's plan had never been about revenge. I already did help you start over, I said quietly. You just didn't notice. Confusion washed over her face. What do you mean? She asked. I'll tell you, I said. But first, you need to understand something about my son. Eli wasn't motivated by greed like you were. He was motivated by something else entirely. And then I told her the truth that had taken me weeks to fully understand myself. Eli's USB drive contained more than just evidence of Marissa's fraud. It contained the real blueprint of his genius. Hidden in the files was a separate foundation, one he'd been funding for years without telling anyone, not even me. The Eli Drayton Foundation for Displaced Families. It was designed specifically to help the families of workers who died in accidents while working for Drayton Logistics. Workers in foreign countries. Workers who'd lost their lives so our company could function smoothly across international waters. In the years since Eli had created it, the foundation had helped hundreds of families. Provided education for kids whose fathers had died on cargo ships. Gave medical care to mothers who couldn't afford it. Built safe housing. Offered job training. Changed lives. And when Marissa triggered the security protocols by committing fraud, Eli's system didn't just freeze her accounts. It redirected the $65 million, her fortune, the money she'd stolen, directly into the foundation's accounts. She'd tried to steal a company built on exploitation and greed, and she'd ended up funding compassion instead. I watched the realization hit Marissa's face like a wave. You mean, the money? That money is going to... She couldn't finish the sentence. To the people your husband cared about, I said. To families who've suffered. To children who'd lost hope. To people who needed help more than you ever did. She sat there for a long time without speaking. And then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Not a bitter laugh. A broken laugh. The laugh of someone who'd finally understood that the universe had a sense of justice she couldn't control. He won, she whispered. Even after he died, he still won. No, I said. He didn't win. Love won. Compassion won. He made sure that grief didn't breed more greed. He made sure that his death meant something. She left that night without another word. I never saw her again. I don't know where she went or what happened to her. And honestly, I don't care. Her story was over. Eli's story, the real one, was just beginning to unfold. Every month, I receive letters. From widows who've been able to send their children to college. From workers whose families are rebuilding their lives. From people who've never even heard of Eli Drayton but whose lives have been saved by his legacy. Those letters sit in a drawer in my cabin, and I read them on the hard days. The days when I miss my son so much that breathing feels like a luxury I don't deserve. But then I read those letters, and I remember that Eli is still out there. Still making a difference. Still changing the world. Even though he's gone. Here's what I've learned after all of this. Grief doesn't always teach you what you think it's going to teach you. Sometimes it teaches you that loss doesn't come from death. Sometimes loss comes from disappointment in the living. Sometimes loss is watching someone you loved become someone you never knew at all. But here's the other thing. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to involve raised voices or confrontations or proving you were right all along. The quietest justice is watching someone destroy themselves with their own greed while the person they tried to hurt ends up changing the world. I'm an old man now. I've lived long enough to know that money can build walls higher than love can climb. But I've also learned that love, real love, builds something money can never buy. It builds legacy. It builds meaning. It builds a reason for all of this to matter. Eli understood that. He understood it in a way I didn't fully appreciate until it was too late to tell him. The shipping company is still running. The foundation is growing. Just last month, I received a letter from a young woman named Sophia whose father died in a Drayton logistics accident when she was 3 years old. She wrote to tell me that she'd graduated from medical school. She was going to be a surgeon. She was going to save lives. And she wanted to thank my son for making that possible. I cried when I read that letter. Not sad tears this time. Grateful tears. The kind that come when you understand that something good came from something broken. Marissa Carrington learned that trust needs to be documented. But I learned something bigger. Love needs to be tested by time. And when it survives that test, when it continues creating beauty even after the person who created it is gone, that's when you know you've witnessed something real. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever felt like grief might drown you, if you've ever wondered whether doing the right thing actually matters, I need you to know this. It does. It matters more than you'll ever know. Don't give up on the people you love. Don't let greed become your North Star. Don't forget that legacy is measured in lives changed, not dollars earned. Subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on your notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Because there are people out there whose stories need to be told. People whose struggles and triumphs and heartbreak matter. And you deserve to hear them. Leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me about a time when you trusted someone and they betrayed you. Tell me how you recovered. Tell me what you learned. Because your story could inspire someone who's standing right where you stood. Your words could save someone's life. And that's a legacy worth leaving. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing in the power of stories. Thank you for being part of this family. Eli would have wanted you here.